Okay friends, one of the first things we have to do to get started on our job is to safely raise and support the rear of the truck so the wheel's off the ground. After that, remove all 5 of your lug nuts and then remove the wheel. Now with the wheel off of there, we have a nice clear view of our braking system. The next thing that we're going to do is go ahead and push back our caliper piston. To do that, I'm going to use a pry bar like this and come in between the caliper and the rotor itself and gently pry. If you wanted to, you could carefully open up your bleeder screw. That's going to allow the fluid to escape through there, so make sure you have a collection bucket. For me personally, I'm just going to slowly push this back. Maybe. Now, once you have the caliper piston pushed back as far as you can get it, the next thing that we're going to continue on doing is to remove our caliper slider pins. Okay, leave that one in there a little bit. Remove the other one. Now we're going to carefully remove the caliper. Once you have it off, inspect the area around the piston here. If you see any fluid coming out, it's probably brake fluid, and that means you need to replace your caliper. Assuming it looks good, let's set it aside. If you find that your caliper piston didn't push in all the way, just go ahead and carefully press it in until it's fully bottomed out. Next, we're going to remove our pads from the bracket. Set those aside. Once you have the pads out, continue on by removing your 2 caliper bracket bolts. Now we're going to leave this bolt in a little bit, and then we'll move down to doing this one. Fully remove the upper bolt, and then remove your bracket. Next, we're going to remove the rotor from the axle. Something to pay attention to is you want to make sure that you spray it down with some penetrant around each of the studs, and then of course around the center area where the axle goes through the rotor. You might find that there's a couple holes look like this that are threaded. You can try to screw in some bolts. That'll help press the rotor away from the axle. If you don't have the right size bolts, put on a lug nut, and then use a hammer. There it is, friends. With the rotor off of there, the next thing that you want to pay attention to is the backing area. These shoes right along here are considered your emergency brake shoes. You want to look at those. Make sure that they're in good condition and they have plenty of meat. Also, take a look at your backing plate. If you see a lot of rot flakes like this or anything that might potentially fall off and fall inside, you're going to want to make sure you get that out of there. Once you have everything scraped down, continue on by cleaning it off with some parts cleaner. Make sure you have a nice collection bucket under there. This area down along here is considered your adjuster. You want to make sure that you have that clean and well lubricated. I'm going to clean it off first and let it dry. We'll come up along the top here. This area right here is considered your emergency brake actuator. So when you go ahead and push on that emergency brake, it's going to stretch the shoes. You need to make sure this is clean and well lubricated as well. Once all of your parts cleaner is dried off, the next thing you want to do is clean down the mating surface of your axle where the rotor is going to sit on. Now that I have the mating area cleaned off, the next thing I want to do is use some lubricant, and I'm going to go along the pivot area here, right on the actuator, right there, and inside this area here. I'll go ahead and get up in there. And then of course we're going to make our way down to the adjuster itself. I'm going to spray along the threaded area, and then I'll come right down along this area where you can see that there's a groove. Just give that a light spray as well. Now let's just move that adjuster around just to ensure that it's completely broken free. We want to make sure that this can adjust once we get the rotor on. Spray the mating surface with some copper never sees. Okay, now let's go ahead and put on our brand new rotor. We'll just go ahead and slide this over. Now the next thing that we're going to want to do is turn this so that we have access to our adjuster that was on the back side there. Once you have it lined up, continue on by adjusting your emergency brake so it just barely touches, but you can still move this. Now it's going to be time to start taking the tins off of our bracket. To do that, I'm just going to get along this edge right here and pop it right off of there. Do the same to all 4. Now once you have all those off, the next thing I want to do is clean up the areas where those tins were, all 4 corners. With all 4 areas cleaned up, the next thing that we want to do is clean out the ports where those sliders are going to be. Typically when you do this, you're just going to use a rag. I'm going to twist it and slide it inside there. You could of course use something else to try to wiggle it around while it's in there. Don't use any parts cleaner on the rubber. Okay, once you get it in there, just twist it around. Try to get out any of the debris or gunk that might be located on the inside. Pretty nasty. Now we'll do the same to the other one. Once you have the bracket all cleaned down, the next thing that we're going to do is get ready to install our tins. You're going to notice in the bag of tins, it comes with 8 of them. We need 4. When you look at them, you're going to see that there's 2 different types. There's ones that have the little flippy-do that shoot off to one side, and then of course there's ones that have the flippy-do that shoot off to the other. You want 2 of each. Let's take some of the grease, and we're going to come right along the areas that we cleaned up where the tins are going to ride. Once you have the caliper bracket greased up, the next thing we're going to do is get ready to install our tins. Pay attention to the little flippy-do that shoots off the side. You want to make sure that you have that flippy-do facing away from where the rotor is going to ride. The rotor is going to be in the center of the bracket. Slide it in there, make sure it's completely latched on, and do the same to the rest. Now it's going to be time to get this onto the truck. Go ahead and slide it over the rotor. Take both of your bolts with a little bit of red thread locker, start them in, and then we'll torque them to 46 foot-pounds. Now it's time to install our brake pads. You want to make sure that this is able to slide in and out. If it doesn't, more than likely you didn't clean up your bracket enough. Okay, wiggle it around. Perfect. Now that the pads are in, the next thing we need to do is get ready to install the caliper onto the pads. Before we can do that though, you need to inspect your sliders. Make sure that they're in good condition. If it looks like it's rusted up like this one or covered in debris, you need to make sure that they're nice and clean. Let's do that now. Okay, now I have both of my sliders nice and clean. Something that I want you to make sure of is this area up here, right where that little groove is before the threaded area. Make sure that that's clean as well. That's where the boot's going to ride. If you have corrosion or anything inside there, there's a possibility moisture is going to make its way in, and of course it's going to damage the slider. Let's take some lubricant. We're going to cover the entire shaft of the slider, and then of course make sure we get down and into that groove as well. That's going to help keep the moisture out of there. Okay, set these aside. Now we're going to take some of that lubricant and we're going to go right along the piston of the caliper here. After you've got that done, do along the backside of both of these ears. This is going to help with vibration dampening and noise reduction. Slide the caliper over the pads, making sure that you're not damaging your slider boots in any way. Go ahead and push them up in there. Now we're going to put in our 2 sliders. Once they're both started, go ahead and snug them up and then torque them to 20 foot-pounds. Let's go ahead and spray down the area one last time. Okay, now the process will be the same for the other side of the brakes. After you've done that, go ahead and put your wheel back on. We'll start all the lug nuts, get the wheel on the ground, and then we'll torque them to manufacturer's specifications. Now when it comes time to torquing your wheels, you want to pay attention to the type of wheel you have. If you have the aluminum wheels, like I do here, you're going to torque these lug nuts to 97 foot-pounds. If you have steel wheels, meaning you could take a magnet and stick it right to it, you're going to torque those lug nuts to 154 foot-pounds. Torqued. Okay friends, we got that job done. What's left to do now? Go ahead and pump up your brakes, check your master cylinder, make sure you're full of brake fluid, and then take it for a road test.